Out of all of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles iterations, the one that by far has the most focus on developing romantic relationships between the characters is the animated series from 2012. The relationship that is most explicitly addressed and explored is the one between Donatello and April O'Neil. However, despite the fact that Apritello has the most focus throughout the 2012 series, it is one of the least favorite of the ships established in the show, second only to the one between two literal siblings, understandably. But why is this ship such a point of contention for the TMNT community? Many people have pointed out the issues with Donnie, April, and the Apritello ship. However, today I want to dive into why exactly its writing is so problematic and how Donnie and April both contribute to its negative reception. That being said, there are definitely some things that are really enjoyable about Donnie and April's dynamic that leave many fans still supporting the ship despite its flaws. No matter where you stand with Apritello as a ship, it's important to recognize these flaws and why exactly they're a problem in the first place. The data I will be referencing throughout this video comes from a survey I conducted of over 200 participants regarding their opinions on different characters and ships. Without further ado, welcome to the Problem with Apritello. April's first appearance in the series happens through Donnie's eyes. Upon seeing her, he says,
"She's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen."
From the very beginning, April is introduced as a romantic interest for Donnie. Throughout the series, Donnie's crush is explored in a variety of ways. However, there are many instances in which a harmless crush evolves into something toxic. I think it's important to address that there are reasons to dislike the ship outside of it being inherently problematic. Early on, Apritello is very much depicted as that awkward, one-sided crush. This leads to many uncomfortable moments where neither April nor Donnie are doing anything wrong, it just has that awkward, uncertain energy that comes with Donnie having his first crush that's unenjoyable for many viewers. A lot of the discomfort with the ship comes from Donnie's actions and comments that are just cringy.
Sometimes things that don't seem like they go together actually make a great couple. I mean food.
No, she's not. You're way prettier. Not that I think you're pretty. I mean, you're not ugly. It's just that I go,
Hey, April. Hey, April.
Donnie, stop talking!
In the season 1 episode Monkey Brains, Donnie makes a flowchart of possible scenarios for asking April to hang out with him. This doesn't specifically overstep April's boundaries in any way, but it is a great example of the ways in which Donnie obsesses over April such that he feels the need to carefully plan out his interactions with her. In the opening of the episode A Foot Too Big, Donnie makes April a music box with a heart and a picture of him in the lid, and she is very clearly not into it.
Wow, that is just super neat. Thanks so much, Donnie.
Donnie also makes a few comments throughout the series where he refers to April as my April, or my sweet princess, or everyone's favorite,
My poor sweet chinchilla.
These comments still fall into this uncomfortable and cringy category, but start pushing some boundaries. By referring to April with the possessive my, Donnie implies some level of ownership over April. In the instances where April hears Donnie make these comments, she reacts in a way that indicates a level of discomfort.
There's a creature out there trying to hurt my April. Our April. April. My sweet princess is alive! Did I mute that?
Let's agree that you did.
This sort of ownership that Donnie acts like he has over April is enforced by his attitude towards Casey as a potential romantic interest for her. In Mutagen Man Unleashed, Donnie blames the reason that April is interested in Casey instead of him on the fact that Casey is human.
why was she even with him? Because he's human, that's why. Big deal. You know how many people are human?
It's very much giving nice guys finish last energy. Another instance of Donnie's obsession with April comes from the episode Fungus Humongous, where his worst fear is that April thinks of him as a freak. However, I would argue that this isn't quite on the same level. His fear here isn't that April isn't interested in him romantically, it's that she hates him. Though of course his feelings for April definitely contribute to the nightmare he experiences. But now we start getting into Donnie's actions moving beyond a generally harmless crush into things that are just weird and uncomfortable. In one of the very first episodes of the series, April asks to borrow Donnie's computer and we see his desktop wallpaper for a brief moment, and it looks like this. Not only is it weird to have a picture of a girl you basically just met as your wallpaper, this is such an unflattering and uncomfortable picture that was clearly taken without April's knowledge or consent. In another episode, Donnie has a picture of him pushing April on a swing, which isn't a problem on its own, but it's in a heart frame, which is kind of weird considering they're not dating or even on speaking terms when we see it. Along the lines of weird pictures, one of the more uncomfortable Apritello scenes comes from when Donnie is remotely controlling Metalhead and waiting with April on the rooftop.
She's so beautiful. On this monitor, she can't tell I'm staring.
You do know that's not muted, right?
Now, the main reason this scene is so uncomfortable is because of the dramatic irony of Metalhead being so loud and Donnie not knowing April can hear him, not necessarily what Donnie's saying. That being said, Donnie zooming in on April's face in real time when he thinks she doesn't know is incredibly weird and uncomfortable. Speaking of weird and uncomfortable, the stalking. This only comes up at the start of season 2, but it is definitely one of Donnie's worst offenses. In the first episode of season 2, Donnie asks his brothers if they're going to stop by April's, proceeding to state exactly how far away they are from her apartment. Down to the meter. In a later episode, after April has already distanced herself from the turtles, Donnie goes to check in on her because April's always studying in the park around this time. Now, I originally gave him the benefit of the doubt because they were friends, so presumably if this was a habit of April's, Donnie and all the other turtles would likely know about it. It's also possible Donnie came with her at some point or another because of the picture of them hanging out in a similar manner. However, later in that same episode, he admits that he's been following her. A couple of episodes later, we actually see Donnie following April, and she once again tells him to leave her alone.
I know you're following me. Come out so I can see you. I want to be left alone, Donnie.
There is no excuse for this behavior, especially when April has explicitly said she wants nothing to do with the turtles. But what makes it even more frustrating is how dismissive the show is of this behavior. Sure, when Donnie brings up the location of April's apartment or that he's been following her, his brothers call him out for being creepy.
3 blocks and 7 meters away from her apartment.
Yeah, that's not weird or anything, Donnie.
Following her?
Well, that's not creep-tastic.
However, at the end of the episode where we see Donnie stalking April, she forgives the turtles for mutating her dad and says this.
Thanks, Donnie, for always being there. Even when I didn't want you to be.
Even when I didn't want you to be. That would be a sweet sentiment if the context wasn't literal stalking. So while most of the uncomfortable interactions Donnie has with April are relatively harmless and just cringy, there are still a significant number that are disrespectful of her boundaries and her autonomy. That being said, it's important to note that April isn't perfect either. Oh, thank the Lord. If that canceled recording at any point, I'm gonna scream. I'm not gonna scream, but I will freak out. Although the majority of the reasons that Apritello is uncomfortable is because of Donnie's behavior, April is not without her own flaws that contribute to people disliking the ship. Out of the 7 main teenagers that we follow throughout the series, April is very clearly the least favorite. When examining how people rated April compared to Donnie, her reputation was overwhelmingly more negative than Donnie's. So what exactly does April do throughout the series that contributes to the discomfort with Apritello? In order to fully explore that, we need to address a huge component of the Apritello discussion, and that is the love triangle. In season 2, we first meet Casey Jones, who is immediately introduced as a competing love interest to April, constantly referring the time he spends with her as dates. The jealous rivalry between Donnie and Casey is almost immediate, both of them vying for April's attention. However, whether April has feelings for Donnie, Casey, both, or neither is incredibly unclear. April and Casey flirt back and forth when they're together, and there are a few scenes where it seems like she's really interested in him. However, throughout the second season, we rarely see April hanging out with Casey alone, bringing Irma along as a buffer so it is not considered a date.
Thanks for hanging out with us on our date, Irma. We really needed a chaperone. I just don't get why our date had a third wheel attached to it.
Hello, I'm right here.
Additionally, there are many moments in which Casey interacts with April physically that feel very unnatural and uncomfortable for April. Casey and Donnie also have a couple moments throughout the space arc where they make April uncomfortable in conjunction. When they first see April wearing the yellow jumpsuit, they stare at her, leading her to cover herself in her discomfort. At one point, they give April a hug from either side, to which April says, "What did I say about group hugs?" establishing that this is a complaint she's brought up before. Brief trigger warning for SA, there is one scene that I've seen people say implies that Casey has touched April inappropriately before, and that is when she feels something touch her butt and tells Casey to stop before turning around and realizing it's a crang worm. However, April making this assumption that it was Casey doesn't necessarily imply that this sort of thing has happened before. Casey was the only one next to her at that moment, and because she knows he's interested in her, she came to that conclusion. Because Casey has a history of being more touchy with her, she likely would be more on alert for him potentially pushing her boundaries, and so she stood up for herself in that moment. It's definitely a more likely scenario than a weird space worm with a baby face, that's for sure. However, in a later episode where Casey and April swap bodies, he uses it as an opportunity to check April out, and at one point April yells at him for pinching his own butt.
I didn't do anything.
April isn't in her own body in that moment, and Casey takes advantage of the situation in a way that is incredibly uncomfortable as April is unable to stop him from doing so. As for Donnie, I've already explained several instances in which he's made April uncomfortable, such as the metalhead scene or the opening scene of A Foot Too Big. big. But she also has several moments with Donnie throughout the series that feel incredibly genuine and show how much she really cares about him. While some of these moments aren't inherently romantic, she doesn't really interact with any of the other characters this way. She's also kissed him on the cheek 5 times, plus actually kissing him in A Foot Too Big. Speaking of, that episode is a fantastic example of how confusing April's feelings are. The entire premise of the episode is built upon Donnie realizing he's made April uncomfortable with unwanted advances by reflecting on Bigfoot pushing his boundaries and making him uncomfortable. Despite this, when he goes to apologize to April and assure her that he won't bother her anymore, she tells him that he's not just a mutant, he's her mutant, before she kisses him and walks away.
Mwah.
I understand nothing.
Yeah, so does everyone else, Donnie. What makes that kiss even more frustrating and confusing is that in the very next episode, Donnie tries to show off to April by doing a little trick with a mop, and she completely ignores him. Season 2 has a lot of moments where it seems like April is developing feelings for Donnie, but in the Season 2 finale, she stops Donnie from confessing his feelings to her.
I'd better just tell you kinda how I feel. Ow!
Oh, sorry, Donnie. You should stop talking. It just makes things hurt more.
Based on April's reaction here, it's pretty clear she knows what Donnie's about to say and doesn't want him to confess because she doesn't want him to be hurt. Presumably, the reason Donnie would be hurt is because she would reject him, right? So although she's been getting closer to, and it seems like she's been developing feelings for Donnie throughout the season, this moment goes directly against that. However, I think a different interpretation could be she doesn't know what's going to happen in the Krang invasion, and if something happens to one of them, that would be what hurts. Either way, April doesn't want Donnie to confess his feelings to her. This is one of the reasons April annoys me personally, and it's that she actively avoids committing to anything. Even though she's definitely known about Donnie's feelings for her, considering how obvious they are, and that she's literally psychic, Donnie telling her would change their dynamic because now he knows that she knows, and they would have to directly address it. April doesn't want the ball to be in her court. Whether or not April reciprocates Donnie's feelings, it would then be up to her to decide what she wants their relationship to be. Based on the fact that April's been leading Donnie and Casey on throughout the series, it's pretty obvious she doesn't want to make a commitment to either of them. However, after rewatching the series and watching the way in which April interacts with both Casey and Donnie, it seems like she definitely has feelings for both of them. So what does she do about it? Nothing. At least nothing concrete that solidifies her relationship with them. As I mentioned earlier, April and Casey flirt throughout the second season while she is simultaneously getting closer to Donnie, kissing him on the cheek, telling him he's the best, etc. All the while, the jealous rivalry between Donnie and Casey continues to grow. There are at least 3 episodes in the series that start with Donnie and Casey fighting about something before they face some adversity together and become better friends in the end. Those episodes being The Manhattan Project, A Chinatown Ghost Story, and Speed Demon. However, their rivalry is never completely squashed, and they still continue to vie for April's attention, and April still gives them that attention. Although post-Farmhouse, April mostly focuses her attention on Donnie, there is still that uncertainty as she does not commit to him in any meaningful way. Beyond the love triangle, April has some moments in which she just isn't very likable. In an early Season 1 episode, Donnie asks April about a piece of technology he found, and without even looking up from her computer, she dismisses him.
Do you know what this is?
No?
When Donnie fails to save April from falling in the mutagen and she swims out unscathed, the first thing she does is give Donnie a bitter look as she spits out,
Nice catch, Donnie!
In one episode, she accuses Donnie of wanting to team up with Karai simply because she's pretty. She also eats all of Donnie's food at one point, which is just rude. That being said, the main reason people dislike April is because of the way she leads Donnie and Casey on, as I explained earlier. If I'm going to talk about why people don't like April, especially in regards to her relationship with Donnie, I have to talk about the episode The Power Inside Her. In this episode, an alien being who has been living inside April's crystal takes possession of her, leading to Donnie getting scattered on a molecular level. I've seen several people cite this episode as a reason to dislike April because she killed Donnie without remorse, which simply isn't true. Rewatching the episode, it is very clearly established that there are 2 entities inhabiting and fighting for control over April's body, April herself and the Aeon known as Zon-Naran. Whenever Zon-Naran is in control of April, her eyes glow this blue color and she speaks with a spooky voice effect. Multiple times throughout the episode, we see April temporarily escape from Zon-Naran's control, terrified of what's going on. At the moment of Donnie's death, April is briefly in control before Zon-Naran takes over and actually kills him.
You can do it! I know you can!
I'm not strong enough. Donnie, I'm sorry.
Note the glowing eyes and voice effect. But why would Zonaran destroy only Donnie and no one else? Well, later in the episode, she says this.
Do not stand in my way, or you will be cleansed, just as Donatello was.
Zonaran felt threatened by Donnie's presence because he could have given April the strength to fight against her. The reason that April is ultimately able to break out of Zonaran's control is because Raph tells her to remember Donnie. It's these memories of Donnie that finally free her. Zonaran likely sensed that Donnie would have been able to pull April from her grasp and thus tried to destroy him. So clearly April wasn't the one to pull the trigger on Donnie, so to speak. However, many people have brought up that April's obsession with the crystal and refusing to take it off is what led her to be possessed in the first place, and she should have listened to Donnie and the other turtles begging her to take it off. But April refusing to take off the crystal isn't simply because of the power that it gave her. Whenever April is overprotective of the crystal, she acts crazed and completely out of character.
I don't want to relax. I want my crystal. It's my crystal. I'm never gonna take it off again for anyone or anything. Ever again.
April's outbursts are the influence of Zonaran taking over her consciousness and lashing out as a form of self-preservation.
I have been transplanting my mind into her consciousness, slowly.
And even if this wasn't the case, April feels the full guilt and full responsibility for what transpired.
What have I done?
It's not your fault, April.
But it is. It was all me in a way.
I'm so sorry. I guess I should have listened to you about the crystal. Especially you, Donnie.
So although I agree that this event would be traumatic for everyone, and the show definitely brushes past it, I don't think it's a fair reason to dislike April as a person. Despite the fact that April undoubtedly has moments that make her unlikable, Donnie and Casey are definitely more problematic in their attitudes and behaviors toward April. So why exactly is she disliked that much more? The reason for this is actually quite simple. A lot of April's characterization is defined by her being a romantic interest. Her very first introduction in the series is from Donnie's perspective, finding her attractive. Although she does play a role in the overarching story of the series through her ties to the Krang, especially early on, she very much just serves as a means of giving Donnie character development. Donnie, on the other hand, is primarily defined by being one of the 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. His personality also isn't solely defined by his feelings for April. He has a fire in him and sass that make him an incredibly enjoyable character. April, on the other hand, doesn't have a particularly interesting personality. She very much fits the role of being the girl of the group. Because of this, when a generally boring character has moments that make her unlikable, it's a lot easier to focus on those moments because those are the instances in which she stands out. So by this point, we've established that Apritello is pretty problematic in its writing, from Donnie's obsessiveness to April's dismissiveness to the whole love triangle mess. But what I find fascinating is the fact that a ship from another series that has an incredibly similar dynamic and many parallels to Apritello is far better received and supported. And that ship is Adrinette from Miraculous Ladybug. Let's do a little comparison, shall we? For those of you who are unfamiliar with the show Miraculous Ladybug, here is a brief summary. 2 teenagers, Marinette Dupenchang and Adrienne Agreste, are granted superpowers and become Ladybug and Cat Noir, trying to stop the evil Hawkmoth from taking over the world, or whatever his evil goal may be. Marinette is in love with her classmate Adrienne, and Cat Noir is in love with his superhero partner Ladybug. The twist is, they don't know each other's secret identities. And thus, the love square is born. Now obviously this is a complicated mess, but we're going to be focusing on this relationship here, Adrienne and Marinette, or Adrinette. Marinette expresses the same obsessive and stalkerish behavior towards Adrienne as Donnie does for April. Both of them have convoluted plans they use to try and get their crush to hang out. Both of them have their crush as their wallpaper. Both of them have an incredibly uncomfortable scene that utilizes dramatic irony. Both of them have a history of stalking their crush out of jealousy. Both of them stutter and say embarrassing things around them. There is just so much about each of their behaviors that is incredibly similar. However, I would argue that Marinette has far worse habits and behaviors than Donnie when it comes to her crush on Adrienne, such as having pictures of him all over her room or having his schedule memorized for the next 3 years. Now, there is slightly more lenience here because Adrienne is a model and has had a very public life that has been super strict and planned out to the minute, but it's still incredibly weird for Marinette to have all these pictures of her classmate and knowing where he's gonna be at any given time. But by far, Marinette's worst offense is when she abuses her superhero powers to break into Adrienne's room to deliver a gift. Say what you will about Donnie, but at least he never broke into April's room and smelled her pillow. However, as I mentioned before, Adrinette has a much better reputation than Apritello. When participants were asked to rate each ship on a scale of 1 to 5, Adrinette averaged more than a point higher than Apritello. Why is there this huge discrepancy between the reputation of these two ships despite being incredibly similar? I have a few theories. The first reason for this discrepancy likely comes from the difference in who is watching each show. If we look at the average rating based on those who watched Miraculous only versus those who watched Miraculous and TMNT 2012, Adrinette averaged about half a point higher for those who watched only Miraculous. There is a very simple explanation for this, and that is that the main appeal of Miraculous Ladybug is incredibly different than that of TMNT. Although both are essentially superhero shows, the love square I mentioned before is incredibly prominent in the main plot of Miraculous and is arguably the main appeal of the show. It has just as much focus as the main plot of superheroes stop supervillain. On the contrary, TMNT is a superhero style show first, and all the romantic subplots we see are incredibly secondary. Many fans of TMNT 2012 expressed how the ships in the show felt forced or unnecessary. Because of this, it makes sense that Miraculous fans would be more likely to be supportive of a ship that is a huge staple in the show as opposed to TMNT fans who likely didn't pick up the show for those relationships. But this wasn't the only discrepancy between these fan demographics. Those who watched only TMNT 2012 also rated Apritello higher than participants who had watched both. This is more of a hypothesis since I don't have any solid evidence to back it up, but my guess as to why this is the case is that people who watched both shows are more likely to have watched and consumed more media in general. Because of this, they likely would approach each new show they watch through a more critical lens and would be more likely to pick up on problematic writing. But, as I said, just a hunch. Despite these disparities, the average rating from participants who watched both shows was still significantly higher for Adrinette than it was for Apritello. In fact, 2/3 of these participants gave Adrinette a higher rating than Apritello, so what is really the difference here? A very important discrepancy between the two ships is the role of gender. Adrinette illustrates a girl pining after a boy, while Apritello has a boy pining after a girl. I don't need to prove that men have more power and control in society, it's a pretty well understood fact. I don't want to get too serious here, but men also have more of a history of making unwanted advances, from catcalling to other less savory actions. As a woman watching each show, I was definitely more uncomfortable watching the interactions that April had with Donnie or Casey because of how they diminished her individuality. Additionally, as discussed previously, April doesn't have much of a personality outside of her role as a love interest. Adrien, on the other hand, has a very interesting story and personality that especially gets to be explored when he's Cat Noir. Adrien is also a famous model. He is well known and is used to having fans obsess over him. While this doesn't make Marinette's actions okay, it is definitely something that he is more used to. April, on the other hand, is just some girl that doesn't hold any significance in the human world. This makes Donnie's behaviors that much more uncomfortable. Ultimately, there's a huge difference in the power dynamic that contributes to the discomfort with Apritello that isn't as present for Adrinette. Adrien and Marinette very much exist on the same level during the show. Although Marinette is arguably the main character of the series, Adrien is just as important and makes up for it through his power and status that he maintains within the universe. April, on the other hand, is much less significant and doesn't play a role in every single episode like Donnie does. So not only is there an imbalance within the universe, from a meta perspective, April doesn't have the same power as part of the series. However, what I would argue is the primary reason for this discrepancy is also the main underlying issue as to why Apritello is so disliked, and that is the difference between each show's attitude towards the ship. Because the romance in Miraculous Ladybug is such a crucial part of the show's narrative, the attitude towards that romance is always going to be one of support. The show wants the viewer to root for Marinette and Adrien to get together. TMNT, on the other hand, does not maintain the same sentiment. I've explained the uncertainty surrounding whether or not April has feelings for Donnie, but the way characters react to Donnie's crush in an unsupportive manner within the show gives the viewer even less of a reason to root for April and Donnie to get together. I mentioned earlier that Donnie is called out by Raph and Mikey for being creepy about April, but there are many moments throughout the series where his brothers mock him for having a hopeless crush on her. Raph in particular makes many comments about how Donnie is a bother to April or that he'll never have a chance with her. It's Raph saying that Donnie doesn't have a chance with April that leads Donnie to impulsively try to rescue her dad alone. When Leo finds out what Raph said, he scolds him but still agrees with his statement.
Why would Donnie try to rescue April's dad by himself?
Maybe because I told him he has no shot with April?
What? Why would you say that?
Because he has no shot with April.
Yeah, but you don't tell him that.
Raph is also the one that points out the parallel between Bigfoot and Donnie in A Foot Too Big.
Bigfoot follows me around everywhere like a love-struck puppy.
Now you know how April feels.
Although Mikey tends to be more protective and encouraging of Donnie when it comes to his crush on April, he compares Donnie's relationship with her with the events of Super Robo Mecha Force 5.
I'd like to invite you for a space dinner, if you please. Yes.
What? I date a weakling like you? Not for 10,000 Zarkon crystals.
Donnie, that is so you and April, dude.
It is not.
I am hurt beyond all recognition. I never want to speak to you again.
Whoa, dude. The show totally paradoxes your life. Kinda owie in the corazon. That means heart.
It's also incredibly confusing how some of the episodes that directly focus on Apritello try to push Donnie away from his feelings before reeling him back in by the end. I've already talked about A Foot Too Big several times already, but the episode intentionally draws parallels between Bigfoot making Donnie uncomfortable and Donnie making April uncomfortable. This leads him to accept that she isn't interested in him by the end, but then she kisses him for reasons. In the Ice Cream Kitty music video, April pulls Donnie in for a kiss as the onlooking crowd cheers in anticipation, but afterwards he just looks sort of confused, which is such an odd choice to make. Technically, this isn't part of the show itself, but it mirrors how the attitude that the ship maintains toward Donnie and April is confusing. And before anyone asks, yes, I have seen the alternative ending to the Ice Cream Kitty music video, and I wish I could burn it from my memory. The show is able to poke fun at Apritello in a way that doesn't undermine the potential of the ship's success, like Donnie confidently saving April before they plummet to the ground, or April inadvertently calling Donnie a worm. Unlike other instances where the characters' attitudes go directly against Apritello, these moments are able to play with their dynamic in a comical way that doesn't undermine the potential of them getting together. And the show does directly address Donnie needing to give April space. Splinter calls Donnie in for a training exercise and tells him that he's gonna learn to like falling down before continuously knocking him to the ground.
Do you like it yet?
No, Sensei, not at all.
Then perhaps one cannot make someone like something.
Of course not. No one wants to be... Oh, I get it. You're talking about me and April.
What I really like about this moment is Donnie is told that he needs to give April her own time and her own space in a healthy way. Unlike the other instances that generate a distasteful attitude towards Apritello, this is one that leaves it open-ended, especially because Splinter tells Donnie at the end that there is always hope. So the series definitely could have had more moments like this that allowed for a more nuanced view of the ship without making it confusing as to whether or not we should be rooting for them. So the primary reason people don't like Apritello is because of its inherently problematic writing. The reason it's easier for viewers to latch onto those issues is the show doesn't give us an incentive to support the ship in the first place. As a viewer, it's incredibly unclear if you should be rooting for Donnie, pitying him, or making fun of him like his brothers. Now that I've spent the past 15 minutes or so convincing you that Apritello is problematic, let me switch gears and explain why the ship is still enjoyable for many people and why I personally really like their dynamic. There are so many moments throughout the series where April and Donnie have such genuine interactions and great chemistry with each other. In the first couple episodes of the series, they actually have some really cute moments, such as Donnie offering his hand to her after saving her from the Krang, or the little wave they share after dropping her off at her apartment. April also gives Donnie this look when he promises that they'll save her dad from the Krang. Throughout Fungus Humongous, while April is having hallucinations about her dad attacking her, Donnie is incredibly gentle and reassuring.
It's all right. Calm down. Everything's gonna be okay.
We also see this gentle tone and concern for April in Karai's vendetta when she tells the turtles she's going to the surface.
Whoa. You're going topside? Oh! You got your T-phone, right?
Donnie, don't worry. I'll be fine.
When April comes to the sewers looking worried about something on multiple occasions, Donnie rushes to her side to make sure that she's okay. April also goes directly to Donnie for comfort many times throughout the series, such as when they thought Leo was killed in the Technodrome, or when Casey got eaten by the Krang worm, and many other instances. Although there are definitely those moments throughout the series where Donnie's interactions with April are uncomfortable that I have covered at length, at the end of the day, it's clear that Donnie cares about April's well-being above anything else. When April decides to cut ties with the turtles because she finds out they're responsible for her dad's mutation, Donnie's immediate reaction isn't that he's upset because the girl he's in love with no longer wants to see him. It's sympathy for the situation that she is in.
I can't believe this is happening. Poor April.
April is incredibly nurturing and takes care of Donnie when he's in need as well, tending to him when he's injured and generally being concerned about his well-being. In general, April and Donnie look out for each other in a way that can be incredibly heartwarming. Some of Apritello's best moments are the ones that aren't explicitly romantic and are just them having a close bond. My favorite Apritello scene comes from season 5, where they're just laughing and throwing popcorn at each other. It's adorable, it's genuine, and it's the perfect representation of the enjoyable dynamic that they can have. It's the fact that these little moments are where Apritello shines is honestly a reflection of its poor writing. The majority of instances where Apritello is directly addressed, it's anywhere from awkward to straight up weird. However, seeing these moments where they have such good chemistry with each other is a great example of how this could have been a beloved ship of the series if it was approached more tactfully. Apritello is a ship that had such potential but was so poorly executed that the majority of fans dislike or even hate the ship. Around 60% of survey respondents had a negative perception of Apritello, and for good reason. Not only is Donnie disrespectful of April's space at times, but in conjunction with Casey's advances and April's flakiness, the writing of the relationship makes it hard to get behind. What makes it even more difficult to enjoy the ship is the show itself doesn't have a clear stance on whether or not it wants April and Donnie to get together. However, there's nothing wrong with liking Apritello as a ship. They have such an enjoyable dynamic, and there are far more interactions between them that are pleasant than those that are uncomfortable or problematic. I am also a firm believer in the value of fanon and fan content. When there are people in a fandom that enjoy something, they can rewrite, reinterpret, and reimagine a part of that canon in a way that makes it more enjoyable for themselves and for the rest of the community. One very popular headcanon from TMNT 2012 is interpreting Leo as trans femme as a way of retconning his crush on his literal sister as a sort of gender envy to make that relationship a lot less weird than the way it is canonically written. As far as Apritello, some people take the whole love triangle mess and instead ship Casey, April, and Donnie together in a polyamorous relationship since the show refused to commit to either Capril or Apritello. When I first watched the show, I was admittedly really into Capritello, and it was actually the first piece of 2012 fan art that I drew. Nowadays, the brand of Capritello that I enjoy pairs Donnie with both April and Casey, but doesn't pair April and Casey together because I'm personally not a fan of that ship anymore. But at the end of the day, someone could recognize the flaws with a piece of media that they like and shape their relationship with that media into something they can really enjoy. The best part of being a fan of something for me personally is being able to improve upon something I love to make it enjoyable for myself and for the communities that I'm a part of. So yes, Apritello has many issues that are important to recognize, but that doesn't mean you're not allowed to enjoy it. Recognizing the flaws in the media that we consume today is how we are able to write and demand better content in the future. Thank you for watching. Please let me know your thoughts. Is there anything you disagree with? I would love to hear what you all think. I was originally just gonna post a few videos up on my TikTok kind of explaining what's wrong with Apritello and why I still enjoy it, but I really wanted to do it justice and just dive right in, and I'm glad that I did. I started posting on TikTok a couple years ago because I wanted to overanalyze my favorite show at the time, Miraculous Ladybug, and now that TMNT has become a huge part of who I am, I'm kind of just continuing with that now. So yes, I wrote a 26-page essay on Apritello for the fun of it. I plan on making another video essay touching on the ways in which the 2003 Turtles challenge the stereotypical roles that you see for them throughout the other iterations, but if there are any other TMNT topics you want me to cover in this same format, let me know. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see y'all next time.